They told me it was just cost optimization, a sterile Zoom call, a forwarded email, and 6 years of my life reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. $50,000. That's what they thought I was worth. The price of keeping their bonuses intact while they buried their mistakes. They chose to sacrifice me, thinking I'd disappear quietly like a discarded printer cartridge. But some silences are more expensive than others. They saved $50,000. It would cost them $15,300,000 careers. This is how a data manager became their most expensive mistake. My name is Rachel Monroe. And until 3 weeks ago, I believed loyalty meant something in corporate America. 34 years old, 6 years at Neurovia Systems, and apparently worth exactly $50,000 less than nothing. The morning it happened, Boulder Creek was experiencing one of those crisp Colorado dawns that usually filled me with purpose. I'd already reviewed the quarterly data metrics over coffee, mentally preparing for the 9 a.m. team stand-up. My phone buzzed. Darren Thorne, my direct supervisor, requesting an urgent one-on-one. Nothing unusual there, except for the fact that HR was included on the invite. Rachel, I want to start by saying this isn't personal. Darren's face filled my laptop screen, his expression carefully neutral. Behind him, the same motivational posters I'd helped choose for the office. The company is undergoing financial restructuring. Financial restructuring. I'd heard those words before, usually right before good people got thrown under the bus. But I'd pulled Neurovia through the 2021 data crisis. I'd built their entire analytics framework from scratch. My team trusted me. Hell, I'd just received a commendation letter 2 months ago. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. Darren continued, his eyes never quite meeting the camera. We'll be transitioning to a more cost-effective solution. Cost-effective solution. I learned later they'd already hired my replacement through an outsourcing firm, someone willing to do my job for $70,000 instead of my $120,000 salary. $50,000. That's what 6 years of 60-hour weeks, weekend emergencies, and missed family gatherings were worth. The HR representative droned on about severance packages and COBRA benefits while I sat there, feeling something inside me crack. Not break, crack. Like ice before an avalanche. Do you have any questions? She asked, her voice professionally sympathetic. I had hundreds. Why now? Why me? Why was Darren, who I'd caught inflating project budgets last year, still sitting pretty while I was being shown the door? But I just shook my head, maintaining the same poker face that had served me well in countless board meetings. We'll need your laptop and access badges returned by end of day. Darren added quickly. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Security? Like I was some kind of threat, maybe I should have been. After the call ended, I sat in my home office, staring at the blank screen. 6 years, I'd given them everything. Worked through my father's funeral. Postponed my wedding. Canceled vacations when servers crashed. And they'd reduced all of that to a simple calculation. My salary minus outsourced labor equals shareholder value. But here's what they didn't calculate, the cost of secrets. Because in 6 years of managing data, you learn things. You see patterns. You notice when numbers don't add up. When reports get mysteriously revised. When millions in AI development costs produce nothing but vaporware. They thought they were buying my silence for the price of a severance package. They thought I'd slink away, grateful for 2 months' pay and a neutral reference. They thought wrong. As I boxed up my things under the watchful eye of Gary from security, Gary, who I'd shared lunch with every Tuesday, I made a decision. They wanted to save $50,000. Fine. But they were going to learn that some employees are worth more than their salary. Some employees know where the bodies are buried. And me? I didn't just know where they were. I'd helped dig the graves. The first week after the layoff, I couldn't get out of bed. Not depression exactly, more like psychological whiplash. One day you're essential, the next, you're expendable. My fiancé, Marcus, tried to help, bringing me coffee and reminding me that everything happens for a reason. But platitudes couldn't fill the Rachel-shaped hole in my identity. By week 2, anger had replaced shock. I'd replay that Zoom call obsessively, analyzing every micro-expression on Darren's face, the way he'd rushed through the termination, the way HR had muted themselves when I'd asked about the timing. Something felt orchestrated, surgical. This wasn't random cost-cutting. Then the LinkedIn notification came. Neurovia had just announced record quarterly projections, boasting about their lean, efficient operations. The same day they'd told me they couldn't afford my salary, they'd greenlit a $2 million executive retreat in Aspen. The hypocrisy burned like acid in my throat. I started digging. First, just to understand, then, to document. My personal laptop still had access to some shared drives, an IT oversight they'd apparently missed in their rush to escort me out. What I found made my stomach turn. The AI project I'd been documenting inconsistencies in, it was hemorrhaging money. Millions allocated, nothing delivered. But the reports to the board showed steady progress, glowing metrics, imminent breakthroughs. The pattern became clear when I cross-referenced the budget allocations with actual expenditures. Money was moving, but not where it was supposed to go. Contracts with vendors that didn't exist. Development costs for products that were perpetually in beta. And at the center of it all, Darren Thorne, my former supervisor, signing off on every fraudulent report. I remembered last year's incident. I'd flagged a $500,000 discrepancy in his department's budget. He'd explained it away as an accounting error, promised to fix it. I'd trusted him, let it go. Now I realized that was my first mistake. My second was thinking loyalty would protect me. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. I wasn't laid off to save money. I was eliminated because I knew too much. Because I'd been asking the wrong questions. Because eventually, I would have found what I was finding now. Except I would have been on the inside, with the power to do something about it. My phone rang. Unknown number. Rachel. It's Jasmine Cook. I knew the name. Former legal counsel for Neurovia, left under mysterious circumstances last year. The rumor mill said she'd tried to sue for wrongful termination, but couldn't make it stick. I heard about what happened, she continued. Coffee? I think we should talk. We met at a small cafe in downtown Boulder, far from Neurovia's territory. Jasmine looked tired but determined, her legal pad already filled with notes. They did the same thing to me, she said without preamble. Found financial irregularities, tried to report them. Suddenly I'm being terminated for performance issues after 5 years of perfect reviews. What did you find? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Systematic fraud, but I couldn't prove it from the outside. They'd locked me out of everything, destroyed my credibility. She leaned forward. But you're different. You were in data management. You had access, I never did. I thought about the files still sitting on my laptop, the evidence I'd been collecting out of hurt and anger. What if I told you I still do? Her eyes sharpened. Then I'd say we have a chance to do what I couldn't do alone. Expose them. Make them pay. The legal route didn't work for you, I pointed out, because I played by their rules. Lawsuits, corporate lawyers, sealed settlements. She smiled grimly. But there are other ways. Whistleblower protections, SEC investigations, media exposure. They can silence one voice, but not a chorus. That night, I sat at my computer with a choice to make. I could walk away, take my severance, find another job, pretend the last 6 years hadn't happened. Or I could fight back. Not just for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it, but for everyone else they'd stepped on. For the truth. I opened a new document and began typing. Financial irregularities at Neurovia Systems, a comprehensive analysis. They'd fired me to save $50,000 and hide their secrets. They had no idea how much that decision would really cost them. The research consumed me. Every morning, I'd wake at 5 a.m., brew a pot of coffee, and dive into the digital paper trail Neurovia thought they'd erased. Jasmine had given me a roadmap of where to look, but the actual excavation was mine to do. My first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Tyler Morrison, a junior developer still at Nerovia. We'd grabbed drinks occasionally when I worked there, bonding over our shared frustration with management's vision. When I carefully reached out, he was more than willing to talk. "It's gotten worse since you left," he said over encrypted messages. "They brought in some contractor to replace you, but she doesn't know the systems. We're all working overtime to cover the gaps." "What about the AI project?" I probed. "Project Apollo? Man, that's a shit show. We're supposed to demo it to investors next month, but the code is maybe 30% functional. Darren keeps saying we're feature complete." Feature complete? I pulled up the investor reports I'd archived. According to official communications, Project Apollo was exceeding benchmarks with full deployment expected Q3. The gap between reality and reported progress was staggering, but I needed more than hearsay. I needed documents, data, proof. That's when I remembered the backup protocols I'd implemented 2 years ago. Neurovia's data retention policy required local backups for disaster recovery, stored on a separate server. The beauty of being the one who designed the system, I knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Working with Jasmine, we developed a systematic approach. She handled the legal framework, what we could use, how to protect ourselves, which authorities to contact. I handled the technical side, building an airtight case from the data. The evidence was damning. Contract invoices for $3.2 million, paid to Prometheus Technologies, a company that existed only on paper, registered to an address that turned out to be a mailbox in Delaware. Development costs allocated to projects that had been secretly canceled months ago. And most brazenly, bonuses paid to executives based on fictional performance metrics I'd been pressured to adjust before my termination. Jesus, Jasmine breathed when I showed her the compiled analysis. "This isn't just fraud, this is a criminal conspiracy." We weren't the only ones who'd noticed irregularities. Through careful networking, I connected with 3 other former employees, each holding pieces of the puzzle. Sarah from accounting, who'd questioned suspicious transfers. David from legal, who'd refused to sign off on questionable contracts. Maria from HR, who'd been terminated after raising concerns about hiring practices for non-existent positions. Together, we formed an unofficial alliance, the Neurovia 5. Jasmine jokingly called us, each bringing our expertise, our evidence, our hunger for justice. The tipping point came when Tyler sent me something that made my blood run cold, an internal memo from Darren, dated a week before my termination. "Need to accelerate timeline on RM situation. Her recent data requests regarding Apollo are problematic. Suggest immediate termination under restructuring cover. Will minimize questions and potential exposure. RM, Rachel Monroe." They'd planned it. Calculated the risk of keeping someone who asked too many questions versus the cost of letting me go. And they'd decided I was disposable. But they'd made a critical error. They'd assumed I'd react like a typical terminated employee, hurt, angry, but ultimately powerless. They'd never considered that I might channel that anger into something constructive, something devastating. I began building our weapon, a comprehensive whistleblower report that would strip away every lie, every misdirection, every fraudulent claim Neurovia had made. 60 pages of meticulously documented evidence, cross-referenced and verified. Financial records, email chains, testimony from insiders. A roadmap of corporate malfeasance so clear that even the most favorable auditor couldn't ignore it. "You know what happens when we submit this," Jasmine warned during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "There's no going back. They'll come after us with everything they have." I thought about the Zoom call, the security escort, the casual cruelty of being reduced to a number on a spreadsheet. "Let them come," I said. "They already took everything they could from me. Now it's my turn." We divided our targets strategically. The SEC would receive the financial fraud documentation. The Department of Labor would get the wrongful termination evidence. The State Attorney General would see the consumer fraud related to false product claims. And the media? They'd get enough to ensure Neurovia couldn't bury this in legal settlements and NDAs. As I prepared the final packets, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that morning 3 weeks ago. Purpose? They'd tried to silence me with a pink slip. Instead, they'd created their worst nightmare. An insider with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The truth was about to become very expensive for Neurovia Systems. The campaign began at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jasmine called it coordinated disclosure. I called it the opening salvo in a war Neurovia didn't know they were fighting yet. First, the anonymous blog went live. Data truth teller, calm. I'd spent weeks crafting posts that walked readers through the labyrinth of tech industry financial manipulation, using Neurovia as a case study without initially naming them. The posts were technical enough to be credible, but accessible enough to go viral among tech workers who recognized their own experiences in the patterns I described. The $1 Million Mirage: How AI Companies' Fake Progress garnered 50,000 views in its first day. Tech Twitter exploded with speculation about which company I was describing. Former employees from dozens of startups shared similar stories. I'd struck a nerve. But the blog was just the appetizer. The main course was our whistleblower report, submitted simultaneously to the SEC, FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, and the Colorado Attorney General. Jasmine had ensured every T was crossed, every I dotted. We'd followed whistleblower protocols to the letter, protecting ourselves while maximizing impact. Within days, I received the first indication our bomb had landed, a panicked email from Tyler. Security just seized 3 executives' computers. Darren's been in closed-door meetings all day. What the hell is happening? What was happening was due diligence dying in daylight. The SEC moved slowly, but thoroughly. While they began their investigation, I escalated the media strategy. I reached out to Kate Morrison, a tech journalist at the Wall Street Journal who'd written critically about startup fraud before. Her response was cautious, but interested. "I'll need to verify everything independently," she said during our encrypted call. "But if even half of this checks out..." It all checked out. I'd made sure of that. The story broke 2 weeks later. Inside Neurovia Systems: How a mid-tier AI company allegedly defrauded investors out of millions. Kate had done her homework, interviewing current employees who confirmed the dysfunction, analyzing public filings that contradicted internal documents I'd provided, painting a picture of systematic deception. Neurovia's response was predictably tone-deaf. They released a statement calling the allegations baseless attacks from disgruntled former employees and asserting their complete confidence in their financial reporting. But their actions told a different story. They hired crisis management firm Sterling Associates. They launched an internal review. They lawyered up. Meanwhile, I kept feeding the fire. The blog posts became more specific, dissecting Neurovia's public statements against the evidence. I created visualizations showing the flow of money from investors to phantom projects. I published the famous Apollo timeline, a side-by-side comparison of what Neurovia told investors versus what their own internal communications revealed. The tipping point came when a current employee, someone I'd never even contacted, leaked a recording of Darren in an all-hands meeting. "I don't care what you've read, you talk to media, you're fired. You cooperate with any investigation without legal present, you're fired. We're under attack by people who couldn't cut it here." The recording went viral. Neuroviagate began trending. 3 major investors announced they were reassessing their positions. The Colorado Tech Association quietly removed Neurovia from their companies to watch list. Research firms downgraded their stability rating, but I wasn't satisfied with death by 1,000 cuts. I wanted the kill shot. That's when Jasmine suggested something bold. What if you went public? Put a face to the story? It was risky. Whistleblowers who revealed themselves often became targets. But anonymity was also limiting our impact. Media needed a human story, not just documents and data. I thought about it for exactly 1 day. Then I called Kate Morrison back. "I want to do an on-record interview, full name, full story, everything." The prep was intense. Media training with Jasmine's contacts. Reviewing every document to ensure I could speak to it publicly. Preparing for the character assassination that would inevitably follow. But as I sat in my home office, looking at the framed photo from my first day at Neurovia, young, eager, believing I'd found a company that valued truth and innovation, I knew this was right. They'd tried to erase me. Instead, I was about to become impossible to ignore. The interview was scheduled for the following Monday. Kate would publish simultaneously with a segment on CNBC's tech coverage. By then, the SEC investigation would be public knowledge, making my revelations part of a larger narrative about corporate accountability. I spent the weekend organizing everything into what I privately called the archive. Every document, every analysis, every piece of evidence, backed up in multiple locations. If they came after me legally, I'd be ready. If they tried to discredit me, the facts would speak louder than their spin. Sunday night, Darren called my personal cell. I almost didn't answer, then curiosity won. "Rachel, let's talk about this like adults," he began, his voice strained. "There's been some misunderstandings. We could work something out." I hung up. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't be said publicly, on record, with the whole tech world watching. They'd wanted to save $50,000. Tomorrow, they'd start learning the real cost of that decision. The Wall Street Journal article hit at 6 a.m. Eastern. By 6:15, my phone was buzzing nonstop. By 7 a.m., Neurovia's stock had dropped 12%. Kate had crafted a masterpiece. The headline read, "Former manager exposes alleged multi-million-dollar fraud at AI startup Neurovia Systems." But it was the subheading that twisted the knife. Rachel Monroe says her termination was designed to hide financial irregularities. My face stared out from the business section of America's most influential financial newspaper. Professional headshot juxtaposed with screenshots of fraudulent reports. My words, carefully chosen during 3 hours of interviews, laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The CNBC segment aired during morning market coverage. I'd driven to their Denver studio at dawn, hands steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. The anchor pulled no punches. "You're essentially accusing your former employer of securities fraud? That's a serious allegation." "I'm not accusing," I responded, looking directly into the camera. "I'm presenting documented evidence of systematic financial misrepresentation. The authorities will determine if laws were broken. I'm simply ensuring investors and employees know the truth." They showed the Apollo timeline on screen. The visual was damning. 2 columns showing the fantasy Neurovia sold versus the reality I documented. The anchor's expression said everything. By noon, 3 more publications had picked up the story. TechCrunch ran with "The Whistleblower Who Could Bring Down Neurovia." Business Insider published "Inside the Neurovia Scandal, A Timeline of Deception." LinkedIn was ablaze with current and former employees sharing their own experiences. Neurovia's response was swift and predictable. Their PR team released a statement calling me a disgruntled former employee seeking attention and threatening legal action for defamation. But their lawyers were smarter than their PR team. No actual lawsuit materialized. They knew discovery would be devastating. What they did instead was try to discredit me. Suddenly, anonymous sources were telling reporters about my difficult personality and resistance to feedback. A clearly orchestrated campaign painting me as a bitter woman who couldn't handle corporate reality. It might have worked, except for one thing: the SEC announcement. Thursday afternoon. The Securities and Exchange Commission confirmed they had opened a formal investigation into Neurovia Systems based on credible allegations of financial irregularities. They thanked concerned stakeholders for bringing the matter to their attention. No names mentioned, but everyone knew. The dam broke completely when 60 Minutes called. "We'd like to do a segment on corporate whistleblowing in the tech industry," the producer explained. "Your story would be the centerpiece." I agreed immediately. This was the platform that could take the story beyond the tech bubble to mainstream America. Neurovia had tried to contain the damage to industry press. They were about to learn what real exposure looked like. The interview was scheduled for the following week, but events moved faster than anyone anticipated. Friday morning, a current Neurovia employee leaked internal emails showing executives discussing damage control and narrative management. One email from the CEO specifically mentioned neutralizing RM's credibility by any means necessary. Then came the recording that changed everything. During an emergency board meeting, someone had left their phone recording. Darren's voice, clear as day. Look, we all knew the Apollo numbers were optimistic, but Rachel was going to blow it up. We had to cut her loose before she figured out how deep this went. The audio file appeared on my blog within hours. Downloads crashed my server twice. By Friday evening, 2 board members had resigned. The largest institutional investor announced they were reviewing their position. Colorado's Attorney General confirmed they were cooperating with federal authorities in the investigation. Marcus found me in my office that night, staring at the chaos I'd unleashed across multiple monitors. Stock prices, news feeds, social media storms, all stemming from that morning 3 weeks ago when they'd decided I was expendable. "Any regrets?" he asked gently. I thought about it. The sleepless nights, the stress, the knowledge that I'd likely never work in corporate tech again, the friends at Neurovia who were suffering from the fallout. Then I thought about Darren's face on that Zoom call, the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that I'd go quietly, the millions they'd stolen from investors while paying themselves bonuses for fictional achievements. No, I said, no regrets. The 60 Minutes producer called back with an update. They'd managed to get Senator Elizabeth Warren to comment on the case for the segment. The story was going national in ways Neurovia's crisis management team had never imagined. As I prepared for what would be the most watched interview of my life, I pulled up Neurovia's website. Their stock price ticker showed a 47% decline from the day I was fired. Their careers page, once boasting dozens of openings, was conspicuously empty. They'd saved $50,000 on my salary. The market had already wiped out $180 million in valuation. And we were just getting started. The numbers, when they finally came out, were staggering. $15 million. That was the SEC's fine for systematic financial misrepresentation and violation of securities law, the largest penalty ever levied against a mid-tier tech company in Colorado. The settlement document ran 127 pages, detailing every fraudulent report, every phantom contract, every lie told to investors. But the fine was just the beginning of Neurovia's avalanche. The layoffs started on a Tuesday. First, the entire executive team, what the board called accepting accountability for leadership failures. Darren Thorne wasn't just fired. He was banned from serving as an officer in any public company for 5 years. His LinkedIn profile disappeared overnight. Then came the rank-and-file bloodbath. With investors fleeing and contracts canceled, Neurovia had no choice but to right-size, corporate speak for desperate cost-cutting. The marketing department eliminated, the sales team gutted, the engineering department working on Apollo dissolved entirely. Tyler sent me updates as it happened. They're calling people in alphabetically. We're watching our careers end in real time. The final count was 312 employees, more than half the company, gone in 3 weeks. The very people Neurovia claimed to value, sacrificed to pay for executive greed. The cruel irony wasn't lost on anyone. They'd fired me to save money and ended up losing everything. I watched from my home office as former colleagues updated their profiles to seeking opportunities. The Neurovia alumni group on LinkedIn grew by hundreds. A digital refugee camp of careers disrupted by corporate malfeasance. Some reached out to thank me for exposing the truth. Others blamed me for their job loss. I understood both reactions. The 60 Minutes segment aired on a Sunday night to 8.7 million viewers. Leslie Stahl didn't pull punches. "You cost 312 people their jobs," she said, her journalistic neutrality barely masking the implicit question. "No," I responded firmly. Neurovia's executives cost those people their jobs when they chose to defraud investors. I simply ensured they couldn't hide it anymore. Those employees deserved to know they were working for criminals. The segment included interviews with 5 of those former employees. Their stories were heartbreaking: mortgages at risk, children's college funds depleted, careers derailed. But surprisingly, Most didn't blame me. We were all living a lie, one engineer said. Rachel just turned on the lights. Senator Warren's appearance added political weight. This is what happens when corporate accountability becomes optional, she stated. Ms. Monroe showed more courage than any regulator or board member. We need more whistleblowers, not fewer. The segment's impact was immediate. 3 congressional representatives called for hearings on tech industry financial practices. The SEC announced a broader investigation into similar companies. Neurovia became a cautionary tale taught in business schools, how not to handle financial reporting, crisis management, and human resources. But the most satisfying moment came from an unexpected source. Maria from HR, one of the Neurovia 5, forwarded me an email. It was from Neurovia's final board meeting minutes, leaked by a sympathetic assistant. The discussion about my termination was documented in black and white. Motion to terminate Rachel Monroe for budgetary reasons. Note: RM has raised concerns about Project Apollo reporting. CFO suggests expedited termination to prevent further inquiries. Approved unanimously. There it was. Written proof that my firing was about silencing questions, not saving money. Jasmine immediately forwarded it to the Department of Labor. Another investigation opened, another fine levied, another news cycle. By month's end, Neurovia existed in name only. Acquired for parts by a competitor at 8% of its peak valuation. The building in Boulder, where I'd spent 6 years, was being subleased. The ping-pong tables and meditation rooms and free kombucha on tap, all gone, replaced by bankruptcy lawyers and document boxes. The numbers told the story. Initial savings from firing me: $50,000 SEC. Fine, $15,000. Lost market value: $400,000. Employees terminated: 312. Executive band years: 5. Investor lawsuits: 17, and counting. One evening, going through my email, I found a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "Thank you. Ms. Monroe, you don't know me, but I was an investor in Neurovia. Not a big one. My retirement fund had about $50,000 invested. Your courage saved me from losing it all. I pulled out the day your story broke. Thank you for doing what the system failed to do. Robert Chen, retired teacher." I read it twice, then saved it to a special folder. Those messages, from investors, employees, fellow professionals who'd been similarly silenced, reminded me why the fight had been worth it. They'd tried to buy my silence for the price of a mid-range car. Instead, they'd purchased their own destruction, and somewhere in Boulder. 312 people were learning what I'd learned that morning on Zoom. Loyalty in corporate America is a one-way street. The only question now was what to rebuild from the ashes. 6 months later, I stood before an audience of 500 at the Denver Tech Ethics Summit. The woman introducing me called me the whistleblower who changed corporate accountability. I just saw myself as someone who refused to be erased. The job offers had started pouring in after the 60 Minutes segment. Tech companies wanting to hire me as a compliance officer. Consulting firms seeking my expertise in corporate governance. Even a few companies brazenly suggesting I could help them avoid a Neurovia situation. I turned them all down. Instead, I wrote a book. The $50,000 Silence, A Whistleblower's Guide to Corporate Truth. It became required reading in several MBA programs. The speaking engagements followed naturally. Conferences, universities, corporate workshops on ethical leadership. Each time I told the story, I watched faces in the audience shift from skepticism to recognition. We all knew a Neurovia. We all had our Darren Thorns. Jasmine and I founded a nonprofit, the Corporate Accountability Project. We provided legal and strategic support to whistleblowers, the kind of resources we'd wished we'd had. In our first year, we helped expose fraud at 7 companies, protecting thousands of investors and employees from the fate that befell Neurovia's victims. The other members of the Neurovia 5 found their own paths. Sarah started a forensic accounting firm. David joined the SEC as an investigator. Maria became head of HR at a startup committed to transparency. Tyler, He's my lead technology consultant now, helping other whistleblowers secure and analyze evidence. Marcus and I finally had that wedding we'd postponed for Neurovia's emergencies. Small ceremony, family only. My wedding gift to him was a promise. No more 60-hour weeks for companies that saw me as expendable. On quiet evenings, I sometimes pull up Neurovia's old website on the Wayback Machine. Their mission statement still makes me laugh. Building tomorrow's technology with integrity today. They'd built nothing but castles in the sand, and I'd bend the tide. The emails still come. Employees at other companies, seeing patterns, asking for advice. Investors thanking me for saving their retirement funds. Students writing papers about corporate ethics. Each message reinforces what I learned. Silence is complicity. And the truth, while sometimes costly, is always worth telling. People often ask if I regret anything. The 312 jobs lost, the careers disrupted, the company destroyed. But Neurovia destroyed itself the moment it chose deception over development, bonuses over breakthroughs. I simply held up a mirror. The financial press called it the Neurovia effect. The increased scrutiny on tech company finances, the rise in whistleblower reports, the boards actually reading the documents they signed. If my story prevented even one other company from following Neurovia's path, then every sleepless night was worth it. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a simple card. Thank you for showing us that one person can make a difference. The 312. Attached was a photo from someone's new job celebration, faces I recognized from Neurovia, rebuilding their lives. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't just destroy, it also creates space for something better. Standing at my office window now, looking out at the Colorado mountains, I think about that morning 3 years ago. The Zoom call, the security escort, the box of personal items. They thought they were subtracting a problem employee from their balance sheet. Instead, they'd added a zero to their losses they never saw coming. I was worth more than $50,000. But more importantly, the truth was worth more than their lies. It always is. They learned that lesson the hard way, written in pink slips and SEC fines and congressional hearings. And me? I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting honest. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and truth-telling. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed corporate injustice? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.